Have you ever felt as though someone was steering your emotions without you knowing how they did it? That gentle twist of guilt, that quiet pressure to agree, that sudden doubt about your own perception. It isn't random. The truth is brutal. Manipulation is not a game of words, it's psychological warfare. And the battlefield is your unconscious mind. Manipulators don't overpower you through logic. They infiltrate through unexamined emotions. They don't argue with your reasoning. They pull the strings hidden in your shadow. In this video, you'll see how they find those strings, how they use them, and most importantly, how to cut them. Because the moment you see the battlefield clearly, you begin to regain your sovereignty. Carl Jung said that the shadow is everything you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. It isn't just darkness, it's potential energy that has been repressed, ignored, or denied. These are your disowned impulses, fears, desires, and memories. You think you left them behind, but they live at the edges of your awareness, influencing every decision. The shadow is powerful precisely because it's unseen. When you deny anger, it turns into resentment. When you bury envy, it becomes competitiveness. When you pretend you're selfless, pride begins to ferment underneath. Each piece of unreconciled emotion is a pressure point inside your psyche. Manipulators sense this instability the way predators sense blood in water. They don't need to invent your weakness. They simply lure out the parts you've suppressed. The shadow, once projected unconsciously onto others, becomes your weakest defense. But here's the paradox. The same energy that can be exploited is the very energy that can make you whole, if you learn to face it. A manipulator studies you without appearing to look. They ask gentle questions. They mirror your tone. They observe tiny reactions. Every uncomfortable laugh, every hesitation, every over-explained apology, they're cataloging data. This is the scouting report they keep in their mind. They learn what you crave: approval, connection, safety. They discover what you fear: rejection, exposure, abandonment. They know when to complement your strengths to create trust, and when to subtly challenge your identity to produce confusion. What you reveal under the mask of being nice or humble often betrays where your boundaries are weak. If you struggle to say no, the manipulator interprets that not as kindness, but as an entry point. If you overshare your pain, they store it as ammunition for later use. But here's the truth most people miss. The manipulator doesn't create your dependency, they activate it. They pull energy from the unintegrated parts of you, the shadows that long to be seen, but were never given conscious form. Mind warfare. Tactic 1. Weaponizing projection and gaslighting. This is the most common maneuver in psychological warfare. Projection is when you see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. A manipulator pivots this tendency against you. When they accuse you unfairly, you rush to defend yourself. When they twist your words, you start doubting your own clarity. That is gaslighting, eroding your confidence in your perception. Here's how it works. Your mind values internal consistency. When someone contradicts your reality with conviction, you either fight back or collapse into self-doubt. Manipulators bet on the second reaction. They use your fear of conflict and your guilt over being wrong to destabilize you. They'll project their anger onto you, then frame you as the emotional one. They'll deny what just happened, forcing you to question memory itself. Once your trust in your own senses breaks, they can install theirs. And that's when you start second-guessing who you are. The antidote is brutal honesty. Recognize that someone is only capable of gaslighting you to the degree that you fear your own truth. When you stop outsourcing your perception, the entire tactic collapses. Mind warfare tactic 2. The shame trap and exploiting unmet needs. Now we move into the deepest territory of psychological manipulation, the exploitation of unmet needs. Every human carries emotional hungers: love, validation, belonging, significance. When those hungers are unacknowledged, they form a psychic vacuum. Manipulators smell that vacuum instantly. They approach as caretakers, mentors, or lovers who finally understand you. At first, it feels redemptive, almost spiritual. But slowly, their approval becomes conditional. You must perform for it. You must confess your flaws to keep their attention. You must shrink the authentic parts of yourself that threaten their control. This is the shame trap. They convince you that your shadow makes you unworthy, while secretly feeding from its energy. Every time you feel wrong, guilty, or inadequate, they harvest emotional power. You mistake your humiliation for intimacy because it feels personal. But here's the truth. It isn't about love, it's about leverage. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious controls our lives, and we call it fate. In this case, the manipulator becomes the living embodiment of your unconscious parent, teacher, or critic. You bend to please them because you're trying to resolve an old wound. The only exit is consciousness. When you see that the shame they trigger was already inside you, the dynamic loses its magic. The manipulator no longer holds the authority to define your worth. And in that recognition, something radical happens. You begin to reclaim every need you projected outward. You realize that no one can exploit a hunger you have consciously embraced. The next time someone uses pity to pull you close or guilt to keep you compliant, stop and breathe. Ask, what do I believe I must earn to be loved? The moment you answer honestly, the spell breaks. Why shadow manipulation is so effective? The reason shadow manipulation works so effectively is because it bypasses logic and speaks directly to identity. When your shadow is triggered, you regress. You become the child seeking approval, the lover scared of loss, the student wanting to be praised. Your adult reasoning collapses into the emotional past. Manipulators exploit this regression. They promise safety to the child part of you, or attention to the neglected self. The exchange is unconscious. You give them authority in return for soothing that ache. But what feels like safety is actually psychic submission. Your energy bends around their narrative. Jung described this as identification with the persona, the mask constructed to gain societal love. Once the mask becomes your identity, you'll defend it at all costs. That's why even intelligent, self-aware people fall victim. They defend the image of being good, loyal, or rational, while the manipulator feasts on the energy hidden beneath. The cost isn't merely emotional, it's existential. Every act of unconscious submission pulls you farther from individuation, the process of becoming your true self. The more you adapt to avoid rejection, the less life force you possess. You start to speak in the voice of your manipulator, think their thoughts, absorb their beliefs. Eventually you feel empty, anxious, unanchored. That numbness isn't depression, it's dissociation from your authentic being. The war has already taken place, quietly, inside your psyche. But here's the redeeming truth. What can be manipulated can also be reclaimed. Once your shadow is known, it cannot be weaponized. Your awareness becomes armor, not avoidance. And the energy you once gave to survival finally flows into selfhood. The battlefield remains the same, but now you see every move clearly. Manipulators thrive in blindness. Consciousness is the light that dissolves their power. Reclaiming your power from the manipulator. Awareness alone isn't enough. Knowledge must become embodiment. To reclaim power from the manipulator, you must retrieve what they exploited. Your disowned emotional energy. Integration is the act of gathering all exiled parts of yourself and bringing them back under conscious ownership. When you stop hiding the parts they used against you, the bond dissolves. Begin with the smallest act of defiance. Name what you feel without shame. If you feel anger, don't justify it. If you feel envy, don't disguise it as ambition. By acknowledging each emotion as yours, You disarm the manipulator's favorite weapon, your need to appear pure. Defense starts in silence. The manipulator thrives on reaction because reaction equals energy transfer. When you withhold that energy, by pausing, observing, and grounding, manipulation fails to land. Silence isn't weakness, it's containment. It keeps your psychic energy within your own field rather than scattering it across theirs. Then establish the boundaries that mirror your values. Not performative walls, but truthful limits anchored in self-respect. You no longer explain why you choose distance, you simply choose it. This clarity signals the end of psychic dependency. True defense also requires compassion for your own susceptibility. You were manipulated because you cared, not because you were foolish. The same sensitivity that made you a target now becomes your intuition, refined and conscious. Carl Jung wrote that the shadow, when integrated, turns into gold. That gold is discernment, the ability to sense subtle coercion before it gains form. Once you can recognize manipulation energetically, you no longer fear it. You study it, understand its motive, and let it pass untouched through your awareness. Stepping out of the shadow. Stepping out of the shadow isn't the annihilation of darkness, it's walking with it beside you. The manipulator once mirrored your unconscious so perfectly that you mistook them for destiny. Now you see, they were only the tutor of your boundaries, the mirror of your forgotten power. You begin living from the center, not the wound. Every interaction becomes a test of alignment. Do I act from fear or sovereignty? When you operate from the latter, manipulation becomes impossible because there's no hidden part left to exploit. The path of individuation demands solitude, but not isolation. It calls for standing as your own authority, even when misunderstood. That's real freedom, to let others project while you remain unshaken in your perception. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. You are not broken, you are being called to wakefulness. What once drained you now instructs you. The pain was never meaningless. It was initiation. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood and still remain whole? The next video awaits you. It's the next step deeper into the power of silence and self-sovereignty.